Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. A while back, I started a series called The Soapbox, where I spend an extended period of time talking about manga series or anime that I've either previously read or watched and thus won't be reacting to on my YouTube channel or Patreon. But I also wanted to offer some more brief reviews since my Soapbox episodes tend to run really long. So I've started this series 10 under 10, where I give my top 10 thoughts on a manga one-shot or an anime miniseries in under 10 minutes, or that's the goal. So for this first installment, as I wait patiently as I can for the release of Chapter 45, Yoneda Ko's masterpiece, Seizuru Tori ha Habata Kanaida, or Twittering Birds Never Fly, I decided to read one of her earlier works, published in 2008, titled NightS, with a bonus 29-page chapter titled Another Night. Yoneda Ko is known for BL stories that touch on heavier, more mature subject matter, while still featuring characters with incredible chemistry, engaging dialogue, and enough steamy romance elements to keep its audience satisfied. So, do NightS and Another Night live up to the standard created by Ko's other works? Let's find out. Here are my top 10 thoughts on NightS and Another Night. Number 10. This is a series of vignettes. The first surprising thing about this one-shot manga is that it's actually 3 stories that are not connected, presented to us. NightS, Emotion Spectrum, and Reply, which is my favorite of the 3. Another Night is a 29-page epilogue to NightS, and we'll talk about that. Given that this came out before Twittering Birds, it feels like 3 separate stories that Yoneda Ko was trying out, flexing to see which one could possibly be molded into its own standalone thing. From the 3, it seems that NightS was the one that laid the foundation for what Seizuru Tori Haba Takainaida would eventually become. But we can see that with number 9. Are these characters prototypes for Yashiro? Speaking of Seizuru, one of the main character leads in NightS, Masaki Hazumi, seems to be a prototype for the masochistic, sex-craved lead in Twittering Birds, Yashiro. He's a Yakuza lieutenant, supposedly, who hires a transporter, Karashima, to push a meth and cocaine deal for his group. Tsunaga, the sales rep, who's new in the Reply story, also has a Yashiro vibe, but he's not as suave as Masaki or Yashiro, although it's okay because Seki makes up for it. And speaking for Seki, number 8, Karashima and Seki have that Domeki vibe, just bro-ier. Karashima admits in NightS to liking Masaki in a scene that feels very reminiscent of Domeki's admission of finding Yashiro quote-unquote beautiful in Twittering Birds. Seki, in Reply, also has a Domeki-like sincerity to his demeanor, though he's much more emotional and open with his thoughts than our stoic ex-police officer in Yoneda's later work. And he's a bottom, but that's a discussion for later. Number 7. Ko's subversion of character tropes. Yoneda Ko's characters often come across as one thing and then drastically change over the course of her stories. In NightS, Karashima comes across as a meat-headed transporter who proves to be much more tech and business savvy than he lets on. And without spoiling the plot, he turns out to be much more than a typical transporter. As for Masaki, he's not what he seems either, and the two get caught up in a sexy cat-and-mouse game. In Emotion Spectrum, a seemingly macho high schooler named Kugo offers the quiet new kid, Usui, to be his wingman in trying to woo their classmate. Kugo comes across as bro-y and aloof, but is really perceptive and, well, except for realizing that Usui likes him and not the guy that he's trying to hook up with. And then there's Reply, which is my favorite of the 3 stories. And in this, Seki is a mechanic, but instead of being macho and greasy, he's a literal cinnamon roll that we can't blame Tsunaga for eventually falling for. And Seki gets flustered, dramatic, and blushes at Tsunaga's handsome face. We live to see it. We understand. But why wasn't Tsunaga doing that from the start with Seki? Who knows? Even later on when, spoilers, things finally get serious between the two, Seki communicates with Tsunaga the roles that men have in same-sex relationships with one another, arguing that he doesn't want to be treated as, quote, the woman when it comes to being loved. I love that these characters in this story have actual communication and talk things through rather than just leaving it unsaid and letting it be just dramatic, unnecessary melodrama. Number 6, exploring differences in age. Another point that Yoneda tackles a lot in her works is the concept of age. In NightS, Karashima is 10 years younger than the 38-year-old Masaki, which is a conversation used for and against their relationship within the story. The concept is only explored in NightS in this volume, but frequently comes up in Ko's other works. So it's kind of a running theme, the concept of age and love and whether it matters or not in a lot of her stories. Number 5, the creation of tension is real. There's just something underlyingly classy about how Yoneda Ko builds sexual tension in her stories. From a simple piece of dialogue and a gesture, like Karashima saying he'll take Masaki to bed, followed by Masaki kicking the back of the car seat and then transitioning to them building up foreplay in an apartment hallway, to the quiet tension building between a seemingly oblivious Kugo and Usui, who's becoming more and more obvious in his attraction to the former in emotion spectrum. In reply, Seki and Tsunaga dance around their attraction through a series of conversations and outings with one another, with Seki finally breaking down and revealing his feelings to Tsunaga, with not the best of reactions, but we'll talk about that below. Number 4, themes and symbolism with agency and self-identity. Emotion Spectrum explores the concept of identity and agency using the tried and true high school romance method, where Kugo realizes his own emotions while trying to rationalize Usui's. Kugo slowly realizes that he genuinely cares for Usui and decides to pursue that relationship. In reply, the concept of cleanliness and work ethic gets brought up between the white and blue collar worlds of its characters, Tsunaga and Seki, through some really interesting scenes with them talking about work and why they fit and don't fit into their respective professions. Tsunaga also confesses that he doesn't feel the same way towards Seki at first, then spends a good portion of the story coming to grips with his actual sexuality and emotions. I love a moment towards the end of Reply, where Seki is afraid to put his hands on Tsunaga because they're covered with grease. It's both a representation of him literally not wanting to dirty Tsunaga's suit, but also not wanting to involve Tsunaga in his own personal and emotional issues. Number 3, the natural dialogue. One aspect of Yoneda Ko that excels within her stories is the natural dialogue between characters. The simplest gestures, such as Kugo running to chase down Usui and Usui teasing him for being sweaty, or the dinner conversations between Tsunaga and Seki in Reply, offer a realistic development of a relationship between these characters, proving you can have a full course meal, but you can also have it spicy too. Leading us to number 2, giving a satisfying resolution. Yoneda Ko knows that its audience wants angst, but we also want a happy ending too. Emotion Spectrum builds the angst as Kugo believes that Usui is in love with his friend, and without spoiling anything, the author gives us the ending that we definitely want. Reply has multiple parts to it, and it deals with the most developed angst of the 3 stories, as its characters have to come to grips with their own personal problems before diving into their other relationships with each other. It has, although, the most satisfying conclusion of the 3 stories, giving more moments that are emotionally satisfying than Emotion Spectrum, and more development of the pairing of Seki and Tsunaga than the 2 characters in NightS. NightS leaves on a cliffhanger in the opening act, and serves as a bookend for the volume itself, with the ending of the volume having Masaki and Karashima finally get together. Of course, the spiciness is saved for another night, and that is literally all it is. It is the dessert after our 3-course meal, and I'm fine with that. So, with that all in mind, leading us back to number 1. Number 1, consider this your gateway into Yoneda Ko's works. If you're a fan of Yoneda Ko, obviously I would recommend this volume, but I recommend it more if you've never read a Yoneda Ko work before. Reading this volume will give you exactly the foundation of what her storytelling is. The 3 stories leave you hungry for more, especially with that adorable mechanic Seki. I can't express how much I love him in this series. But the good news is, if you like this volume, she has a current ongoing series, Twittering Birds Never Fly, aka Seizuru Tori ha Habatakanaida, and several other titles, 2 of which I've actually read and will have links to at the end of this video. Currently, she's one of my favorite BL authors for delivering on the spice while also providing stories with world building and dynamic characters. Definitely give NightS and Another Night a read if it seems like it would be in your taste palette. So, thank you for viewing 10 Under 10. I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know your thoughts down below, and thank you for watching. I'm hoping to do one in the future soon that will go over the Given live action drama and my top 10 thoughts on it. But in the meantime, as always, I hope you have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, And I'll talk to y'all again real soon with more 10 Under 10. Bye.